Good day, students. Today we're going to look at some factoring trinomials. This comes from page 5 of your book 2 text or booklet. So page 5, it's practice 1, and I am doing numbers 10, 11, 14, and 15, as you can see. Alright, now the first two trinomials are distinctly different from the second two. And what I mean by that is, if you take a look at these two trinomials, they're often referred to as a simple trinomial. And simple trinomials are a little bit easier to factor than the other bottom two there. So as you can see, a simple trinomial refers to a trinomial with the coefficient of the squared term equal to 1. You can see the coefficient of x squared here is 1. Coefficient of x squared in number 10 is also 1. Okay, so we refer to those as simple trinomials. Now the method we're going to use is the same method for all four. So the method for factoring trinomials we call the method of product sum. Now the product sum method is a good method to learn because it's very consistent and it's a pattern type factoring, so you can follow the steps. Some books refer to this as the method of decomposition. Okay, and decompose means to break something down. So, and I'll show you exactly that step when we get to it. Now, so the first thing I'm going to do is look at products and sum. Now, you know the word product means to multiply. So in every one of these, we want to find two numbers. Okay, we're always trying to find two numbers whose product, okay, and I'll use the letter P, whose product is, now the product comes from the leading coefficient times the constant. So in this case, or the third number, it would be 1 times negative 6. Okay, so that's the leading, that's where we get it, 1 times negative 6. And the sum comes from the coefficient of the middle term. So the sum is simply negative 1. Okay, because we can see the coefficient of negative x here is negative 1. That's where we get the sum. Okay, now that's where they come from. Now, so let's bring that back. So 1 times negative 6 is a product of negative 6, and the sum is negative 1. Now, you try to quickly come up with those numbers, and you can just do it on scrap paper, use your calculator. So try any two numbers whose product is negative 6. So you might try, say, negative 6 times 1. That works. That has a product of negative 6. However, negative 6 plus 1 does not have a product, or a sum of negative 1. It has a sum of negative 5. So this doesn't work. Alright, so these two numbers are not going to work. Now you can probably see the answer already. Okay, but let's just now try, how about these two numbers? How about we try 3 times negative 2. Now that has a product of negative 6, so that works. 3 plus negative 2 has a sum of positive 1, right? So you can see we don't have the right sign. We have the right number, but the wrong sign. Now that means, okay, that you've got the right numbers, but they're the wrong signs. So of course, you know, you're going to choose negative 3 times positive 2, right, which will give you negative 6, and then negative 3 plus positive 2 gives you negative 1. So both our conditions are met. Now, with a simple trinomial, then that's your factors. You're done. So it's simply x subtract 6, x subtract 3, right? Your two numbers are negative 3 and positive 2, x plus 2. Alright, so as soon as you find those two numbers with a simple trinomial, those are your factors. And the two numbers, of course, were negative 3 and positive 2. So that one's completed. There's your final answer for number 10. Now going to number 11, which is again a simple trinomial. Now what's the product we need this time? Well, the product we need is 1 times negative 8, or simply negative 8. And the sum is positive 7. See how I got those again? Right? 1, the 1 is understood to be here, times negative 8. There's your product. Okay, and your sum is a middle term, positive 7. Okay. Now, what we have to do now, of course, is find those two numbers. Remember, you're always asking yourself that question. What two numbers give me a product of -8 and +7? Now, the first one here, of course, is, let's see, what are we going to try? We'll try 2 times -4. That's -8. That works. 2 plus -4. Whoops, that's -2. That doesn't work. Now, you know I'm trying examples, right, that are not the answers, just to show you how quickly you can come up with them. So then I think you can all see now that if I try -8 times +1, I get a product of -8. -8 plus 1, I get a product or a sum of -7. So the product worked, but the sum didn't. Wrong sign. So it looks like it has to be right. It looks like it's going to have to be +8 and -1, right? +8, -1. Alright, so let's try +8 and -1. So +8 times -1, yep, that works. It's still -8. +8 plus -1 is +7, which is the sum we want. So we have found the two digits, or the two numbers. Therefore, those are your factors, right? So your two numbers here, again, I'll write them down for you, are 8 and -1. They're the two numbers. So that means your answer here is x plus 8 for a simple trinomial x minus 1. And there's the answer to the second one. Now the third one is a little bit more complicated because the coefficient is not 1. So if we look at number 14 here, but we follow the same technique. There's a couple of extra steps here. We're still going to look for a product of the leading coefficient, 4, and multiply that by -3, so we want a product of -12. Again, the product comes from the leading coefficient times this number, the third number. Okay, that's where I got the product. Okay, the sum is always the coefficient of the middle term. So the sum here is +4. Okay, and again, the sum comes from where? There's your sum every time, just the coefficient of the x term. Okay, now again we play with the numbers, and I'm sure you can come up with, well, let's jump right to the numbers this time. Looks like it's going to be +6 and -2. Let's check it. 6 times -2 is -12, so the product works. 6 plus -2 is +4, so the sum works. So my numbers are +6 and -2. There's my numbers right there. Now here's where it gets a little bit more complicated, but not difficult. Okay, what we want to do now is break this middle term, or decompose, thus the name decomposition. Here's the decomposing part. We're breaking down the +4 to two numbers, and in this case it's going to be 6x minus 2x. Now those two numbers obviously come from here, right? We're using these two, and the order makes no difference. So break 4x into two separate numbers. Alright? Now, again, that's simply what we're doing is the FOIL method backwards, or the multiplication method backwards, right? Because when we multiply, we had 4, and we added the middle term. So it's just the multiplication part done backwards. Now what do I do with the 4x squared? Nothing. Just carry it down, put it in front. What do I do with the -3? Nothing. Just carry that down and put it on the end. Now you'll notice I have 4 terms. And when we have 4 terms, we often look to factor by grouping. So I'm going to do it in groups of 2. So what I want you to do right now is ignore this group right here. Ignore this. Just look at the front 2 for me. Okay, now what do I see there? I see a 2x is common. So if I factor out 2x, I'm left with 2x plus 3. In the back 2, now we're going to repeat the process, so ignore this 2, right? Just look at the back 2. And what do I have there? -1 is common. That's the only thing that's common. They're both minuses, and when I factor -1 from both of those, right, I get 2x plus 3. Now remember, factoring is a form of division, so you're dividing. -2x divided by -1 is +2. -3 divided by -1. Remember, factoring is a form of division, so when you divide by a negative number, you're changing the sign on each term. Now if you look at both groups, what do you see? If I look at this group, I see, right, the same common binomial. These are the same, look, and they should come out to be the same. You should have the same common binomial here, and I do. I have 2x plus 3 and 2x plus 3. That means one factor is 2x plus 3, and the other factor is what's left over, which is 2x minus 1, right? 2x minus 1. And that's your final answer right there. Now you can check it again by multiplying, and but there's your answer to factoring that trinomial. Alright, let's do the last one now, number 15. What am I looking for here? I'm looking for a product of 3 times negative 3, which is negative 9. Right? Remember, 3 times negative 3. That's your product each time. What's the sum here? Well, the sum is actually the middle term, isn't it? Negative 8. Remember, the sum comes from right here. That's the sum, the coefficient of the middle term. Now, so we want a product of negative 9 and a sum of negative 8. Now, if we try 3 times negative 3, that's good for our product. But 3 plus negative 3, whoops, that's 0. So that doesn't work. Alright, so we're not going to use, obviously, 3 and 3. Now, how else can we multiply to get 9? Well, there's only one other way. That's 9 and 1. So 9 times negative 1 leaves me with negative 9. 9 plus negative 1 leaves me with positive 8. Okay, we've got the right number. Well, we got the wrong sign. This one does not work. So we need to try negative 9 and positive 1. Alright? So let's try negative 9 times positive 1, which is negative 9, and negative 9 plus 1, which is negative 8. Now, both conditions are met. And again, how do we finish this? Use those two numbers, which are what? Negative 9 and positive 1. Use these two numbers to decompose or break down the middle term. Now the order makes no difference. I could put negative 9x plus 1x, or I could put 1x plus 9x. Both will work. So order of which you put these two numbers. So if I want to put plus 1x minus 9x, right, that will work as well. Now carry down your last number. Don't touch that one, and again carry down the front number. Now we have 4 terms, and remember, 4 terms we look to factor in groups of 2. So just look at the first 2. What do you see common there? Well, they should be y's. Let me fix that. These are all y's this time. There we go. So I look at the first group, I see what common? It looks like just y's common. So I'm take out the y, and I'm left with 3y plus 1. What's common in the second group? Minus 9y minus 3. Now they're both minuses, so I'll factor out a negative, and it looks like 3. If I factor out negative 3, I'm left with 3y plus 1 as well. And again, notice that these turn out to be the same, which they should be. Okay, therefore, one factor is exactly that, the common factor, 3y plus 1. And the other factor is what's left over there, which is, of course, y subtract 3. Alright, so y subtract 3. And there's the final answer for that one. Now, you can check all of these by multiplying. Okay, you can multiply these back out and check them. And you should verify that these are the correct factors. Okay, that's page 5 for different trinomials.